Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live here on Tuesday, May the 13th. I am your host, JT Ruhnke, writer and reporter here at the 440 Sports Podcast Network. You can follow me on Twitter at JT_Ruhnke, and we are back after a little bit of a hiatus and rookie minicamp and all that fun stuff here to break down everything that we saw, not there, but everything we heard from Titans minicamp this past weekend with my co-host and good friend, Stoney Keeley, editor-in-chief of M.L.Rose Network, one half of Football and Other F Words, and co-writer over at Stacking the Inbox. Stoney, how are you, my friend?
Doing pretty good. I've been watching a lot of movies, trying to work my way through the entire Mission Impossible franchise, getting ready for a podcast we're doing later tonight, actually. So I've been stepping away from football for a little bit. My little break this time of year is just about up, and I'm about to be getting back into the Gunnar Helm tape for a future Film Friday. So
I love it. I've never seen any of the Mission Impossible movies. So am I missing out?
I will say, yeah. I think they are genre-defining espionage action films that are 100% worth checking out.
Yeah. All right. Well, maybe I will have to check them out, but good to be back with you all today. Eddie says, bro, how have I never seen them? I don't know. I just have never seen them. Good to see you here in the chat with us today. Reminder, if you are joining if you want to join the conversation like Z Dean and Eddie, and I'm sure so many other friends who will join us today, do us a favor and head on over to the 440 Sports YouTube channel where you can watch and join D Good, who says Star Wars is better. Z Dean says, I'm here to chew bubblegum and talk Titans, and I'm all out of bubblegum. QC Hawk here as well. Good to see you all. Can't wait to break down what we heard from this past weekend. Also, got to give a big shout out and thank you to our presenting sponsor, M.L.Rose Craft Beer and Burgers, 7 locations across the greater Nashville area. More on them later. And of course, Sinkers Beverages. We're already getting into there's already questions about Roger McCreary in the chat. So maybe we learned from last week. I will not start the show off with Roger McCreary. Maybe we can talk about him later, but we're not here to talk about Roger McCreary today. We're here to talk about the rookies who had rookie minicamp. Obviously, there was this big conversation, I will say, over the weekend about how the Titans allow media to conduct rookie minicamp and things like that. Media, if you were not aware, was present on Saturday, but out of the 3 days that the rookies had minicamp, the media was allowed to be there for 1 hour of practice, and half of that was allowed to be recorded. So, like Kenneth says, really wanted to see some 7 versus 7, but was disappointed. Don't be disappointed with us. I promise you. I can't remember the last time. I don't think there's ever been a time that Titans media has been allowed to record 7-on-7 or 11-on-11 or anything like that, right? I know at least last year, from my experience, there was, we were never allowed to record 7-on-7. The things that we were really only allowed to record were what you saw at rookie minicamp, which is drills against air. And even when they put the pads on, right, it was drills with pads on against air, right? They never let us record any of that 7-on-7. Is it because of competitive advantage? Is it because who knows? It's all very silly, and I agree. It's frustrating and it's disappointing. And I have been taking this sort of narrative with some of the content the Titans have been posting online, especially today, where they put this video up of Cam Ward throwing a out route to Gunnar Helm against air, who runs freely down the field on a little bit of a jog, 70 yards down the field. And his teammates at the end of that session come down and they celebrate. And then Cam Ward, someone says, do a flip, and Cam Ward does a somersault after celebrating throwing a single rep to him and running down the field. And I said,
Yeah.
this is the Coco Melon version of camp footage, because it is. Like, if you want to be hyped about that, I'm not saying you can't have fun, but I'm saying, like, I think there is an argument to be made that some of the content they've put out from Cam Ward, from some of these guys, has been very lackluster. You see Jalen Milroe, of all people, getting hype videos from the Seattle Seahawks media. Like, the Cam content that you got with working with veterans, the one that you got yesterday was Cam Ward after the rookies were playing, or finally getting to work with some of the veterans. The one throw that you got from Cam Ward was Cam to Mason Kinsey of all yesterday, which I think is just hilarious. And like, I at this point, like, I'm not, like, when I say those tweets and when I put those things out, like, this is the Coca, I'm not telling Titans fans to not enjoy having fun. I'm saying that, like, the Titans could do better, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if you want to be excited about Cam Ward doing a somersault after throwing a ball to Josh Wiley, like, or not Josh Wiley, Gunnar Helm, like, good for you. Like, I'm not, like, someone was like, don't ruin our fun. I'm not trying to. I just think it's pretty dumb, in my opinion.
Yeah.
About that.
It's like we're being fed scraps this weekend, you know, just the quality, the quantity, whatever you want to say, it hasn't been there this weekend. And I think the frustration is born out of the excitement that this fan base has for a new quarterback. You want to see the guy in action, and I don't want to see him like running down the field after Gunnar Helm like he's got to take a dump or something and doing a front flip. Like, I'm kind of with you, JT. Like, I kind of tune a lot of that kind of stuff out, but you would think from the Titans social media team, they would want to get people hyped up. So I'm curious where the orders are coming from.
Yeah, and there are a lot of different takes on my opinion here, as Derek, like, Derek jokes about this, but I legitimately have gotten a few of these this past weekend where people think that I want the Titans to be miserable. I don't. I just, like, I'm in the business of setting realistic expectations about your team. And after rookie minicamp and what we saw against Air, like, it's exciting. It's fun. We're going to talk about Femi Oladejo and how I think he's already, just by being out there and people actually getting to look at how big of a guy he is and like his energy and his effort that he's putting into these drills. I think that's more quantifiable in changing the opinion on a player than a wide receiver running routes against Air or something like that, right? Like, there are still things to get excited about with this team. We'll talk about some of the interviews, how mature, I think Austin Stanley pointed this out, and kind of this tone-setting draft that Mike Borgonzi said that this draft class would be, kind of already being in action, kind of how they've already started to take the media landscape in their press conferences by storm. We can compare that to, like, what Team Ramrod says here, the Bengals, and how their beginning of their miserable offseason is off to a disastrous start, because I think there's a very, like, that is a wild story to follow with Shamar Stewart and their entire team and what's going on there right now, right? I think, bottom line, though, I think that's it. Just wanted to touch on that. Like, I think you can be excited, but expect more from your team. And I get it. Like, this is how the Titans have worked for the past 4 or 5-ish years, right? Like, I don't think anything's changed. It's just now that your team has gotten, like, should be expected to show more, and you're not getting that because it is the same old Titans showing you doing the same formulaic type of thing with their content. Like, it is a little disappointing. I just think that you should be seeing more than a simple Cam Ward to Xavier Restrepo, like, crossing route that is, like, means nothing.
Give me the Brandon Crenshaw Dixon highlights. I want to see how he's doing out there. That's what I want to see.
You want to see the big boys in action. And I do too. And I think I mean, it's just the beginning, right? Like, that's where people are going to start getting a lot more excited, because we have OTAs at the end of this month, and then we have mandatory minicamp in June before we go into the month and a half of darkness and gloom with no football content to be seen anywhere. However, like, I think this is a good inkling and sets up the kind of conversation I want to have with each of these wide receivers. Like, what is the impact that they can have throughout this offseason with the tone that they've set and looking realistically forward into where they will fit into the roster? And that's what I wanted to dive into today. But first, before we do that, I do want to just touch once again on how the tone is certainly continuing to be set by this class. I was away, not at rookie minicamp. So much like all of you guys, I was watching through other fellow beat writers, Paul Koharski, Teron Davenport, Jim Wyatt, Buck Rising, all of those guys posting clips, watching the live streams along with you guys. But I do still think I got the sense that these are guys who came into this media availability well prepared, and not even well prepared, but just feeling like they are already step above. Like this is new to them, right? They felt like they belonged there in talking to these guys and really believing in the product they're trying to put out on the field, the team that they're a part of. Building that camaraderie was something that I was really impressed to see from a lot of those press conferences. That was one of my main takeaways, was the ability to speak highly of themselves as well as their teammates already, like a week and a half into their off-season regimen program, was super impressive in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I think they kind of almost sound like a hive mind in a way. It's like team first guys. It is let's get to work guys. And I think it really kind of changes the complexion of the question to, okay, well, are these guys being prepped for these media availabilities, or is this just honest reaction in the moment? And it's just a testament to the sort of algorithm, as I jokingly call it, the algorithm that Chad Brinker has written to find guys to throughout the interview process, throughout the draft cycle, to identify signals that indicate that that's just how these guys are wired, how these guys are built. I don't know if you have any insight as to that, or if there is any sort of PR training for players, but on the surface, it really seems like a testament to the due diligence that the Titans front office did in identifying guys that have that mental makeup and have those characteristics that they want to form this team around. This does feel like a foundational class. It does feel like a transformative class. And I think it is I think it's an indication that this front office places an emphasis on the locker room and getting the right type of mindset in the building and building off of that, building skill sets off of that with potential and traits. But it starts with that mentality, and these guys are just echoing it over and over, one after another.
I do think that it is more of a mentality in their makeup than it is a PR training
Okay.
per
Yeah.
se, because obviously every player is kind of given a rundown of what they to expect. Obviously, no one's telling them what exactly we're going to ask, but like they give a rundown, like, hey, these are a couple of questions or types of questions that you could get, just like they do go through some, I guess, a little bit of training. However, like in every player does when they're going to the podium. But you look back at what this class was, right? Cam Ward was a leader on the Miami Hurricanes team. Gunnar Helm, team captain. Kevin Winston, team captain. Just throughout the entirety of the draft process, Femi Oladejo was spoken so highly of how his teammates thought of him. Same with Ayo Manor, which I finally figured out that was how you say it, Ayu Manor.
Is it? Okay.
Yes, and I found that out via the Savannah Bananas game, where they had each rookie run out of the tunnel as they did their introductions at Nissan Stadium this past weekend, and the announcer said Ayo Manor. So I'm gonna run with
Okay.
that. I'm going to run with
All
it
right.
because I feel like if you're in front of 65,000 people at a Savannah Bananas game at Nissan Stadium, right? And you're saying it Ayo Manor, I feel like you have to be right? Like
Has
you
anybody
can't
just
mess that up.
asked? Has anybody just asked Alec?
I don't know.
Can we just
I
ask Alec,
don't know.
how do you pronounce your last name?
I think we should. I think that is a fair thing to ask him probably.
I
However,
think he's
I'm
probably the
gonna
best source.
he probably is. But I think for right now, I like scrolling past the Savannah Bananas highlights and hearing that and saying that's what I'm going to roll with. But sidetracked. he also is a guy who was, built of the right stuff and comes from that Stanford program where he was a leader. You talk about some of the other guys that they brought. Marcus Harris, that defense, that is a well-coached defense that has a strong foundational, even if regardless of how good the player is, comes from a strong defensive program. Same with Kalel Mullings, like Michigan. Like, you look at every spot that they took one of these guys, and either they come from a strong background of coaching and leadership, or they were a team captain of some sort, or had an impact with their team, right? Like, and that translated a lot, and especially with how we got to talk to them, or at least the Titans beat got to talk to them this week. You heard a lot of that, and so I think it does end up coming down to, like, this is a class that I think you're going to continue to see them grow. And it feels to me like we're going to get into the locker room with these guys, and you may not be able to tell a veteran from a rookie because of the type of guys they've brought in.
Yeah. And that's another thing I meant to say earlier, like the maturity, like these guys, I don't know, man. You were actually in the locker room last season. It just feels like last summer is such a stark contrast to this summer so far. And I think the element that I would point to that has changed the most is just how it's like the maturity of the locker room in a way. Like this rookie class, the type of player that they've identified, it just kind of feels like just a little more mature, a little more ready for the moment, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a great segue into something I wanted to talk about today, which was, there was one quote in particular that really piqued my interest with specifically Brian Callahan's media availability, and had to do with Cam Ward and how this entire offseason does feel a little different from the rookies they brought in to the veteran presence they have now here, all the way down to the quarterbacks they have. And obviously it is going to be different when you had Will Levis and you were trying to find out what you had in him versus Cam Ward, the number one pick. He was the number one pick, so you have a good idea of what you potentially could be getting, right? You can't take him 1 overall if you don't have a good idea of what you're getting. But it's different, right? Like, you still don't know if Cam is going to work out, right? You can only hope that you're putting your pieces in place here to have him succeed and be the guy who you think he is. However, I do think that last offseason, we spent so much time talking about the quarterback position, not from meshing with this offense per se, but just the quarterback position in general, the mechanics of it all, the throwing angles, the footwork, those types of things, that we were so concerned with Will Levis because this team was telling us that that's what they're working on. I remember very vividly last offseason how Brian Callahan, Nick Holtz, even Will Levis himself were talking about how this OTA and mandatory minicamp type of process was for him to tweak some things and work on some mechanics, specifically like some of the footwork, some of the arm mechanics. Like, that was a big thing that had a lot of emphasis last offseason. Wouldn't you agree, Stoney?
Yeah, and I kind of want to put on our tinfoil hats here for a minute, and just out of curiosity, I'm wondering, like, how much of that do you think that could have been like a method to develop confidence in Will Levis? It's like, well, if we just fix this, you're going to be great, man. Like, it's almost as if it's like the mental makeup is one thing, but like, if we can just convince him that, oh, if he does this little thing right and this little thing gets ironed out, we tweak this, tweak that, then we're really cooking with peanut oil here. Like, we've got a quarterback that can play, because the messaging is just totally different with Cam Ward, where it's like, it's almost like they're like, no, we don't want to worry about all of that stuff because that stuff makes him special. Like, we want to work around those things. But with Will Levis, it's like, we got to find a way to get to something we can work with to begin with. And we can't just shatter the dude's confidence. So why don't we say we're going to tweak the technique a little bit and improve him?
I think that's a great way to kind of set this up, because Brian Callahan was asked about Cam Ward's unique throwing style, some of those horizontal arm angles, that sidearm type of throws that make him be able to play out a structure so well. And I think he had a really interesting answer, kind of downplaying those things, saying along the lines, once again, of what Brian Callahan said in the pre-draft process, right? Like, we don't want to change the things that make a player special, right?
Mhm.
However, I did go back. I went back through the archives of last
Oh
summer.
boy.
And I looked up, I just did a simple Twitter search and said Levis mechanics and found some videos of Brian Callahan talking about the mechanics of Will Levis and what they were attempting to do. And there are similar, like, the notion is similar. They don't want to change mechanics specifically. But between the two quarterbacks, I think it was really interesting to hear the little caveat between we don't want to mess with Cam. It was more of we don't want to mess with the mechanics. End of story. With Levis, it was we don't want to mess with the mechanics, but like
I wonder if it's a trust factor. If it's like we trust that Cam has the mental makeup to make a play and avoid disaster with the mechanics that he has versus with Will Levis. It's like, you've got to get this right because you don't have the mental makeup to compensate for the gap in the decisiveness, the decision making sort of thing. I wonder if it was a trust factor or something.
Yeah.
Easy to say in hindsight.
Well, here is the full clip on Callahan on Cam Ward's throwing mechanics versus, and I do have it segued right into what Brian Callahan said about the tweaking of Levis's mechanics, and this came back on May 29th of 2024. Here are those two clips for you.
We know his varying arm angles were a benefit to him in college, helped him find a lot of windows and stuff, and that a guy's mechanics at this stage are kind of his mechanics. Is there any tinkering that needs to be done with that? Is there any kind of downside to some of the sidearm stuff that needs to be addressed?
No, I think all upper body mechanics, just from a general, upper body mechanics are hard to mess around with. Those guys have done so many reps of those, it's hard to change that. I think you can change lower body mechanics, though, footwork, things of that nature. Some of the things we worked on, just maybe some footwork, under center stance stuff, very simple things that are easy to adjust. But for the most part, I see no issues with the arm angles and how he throws the football. And if there is, a lot of it usually still goes back to their body positioning and their lower body work. So those are the things we pay attention to. And if we can offer a tweak or a change, then we will. But I would say nothing's usually all that dramatic at this point. They get to this level, they've done it one way for a long time.
We don't spend a ton of time with upper body mechanics as much, but there is some awareness of the general principle of you want your elbow above your shoulder for the most part. Whenever you start to drop it, you do lose control of the ball. The accuracy starts to dip a little bit, but he's been conscious of that, and I think he's done a nice job.
How does that base change? Have a tendency to drop.
And so you see what I'm saying a little bit, right? Like,
yeah.
The going from talking about how we don't want him to do that, we don't want our quarterbacks to do that, to this year, Cam Ward, we're not going to change that because it makes him special, and we don't really want to work with that, versus you don't want to mess with that, but if it starts to dip like that, and you're not the caliber of player that potentially Cam Ward can be, I think that's the difference in what this offseason is, right? And that leads into how fast they've already begun to implement the playbook with Cam, kind of implementing the Miami offense. It feels like this offseason, the difference is that there is no reason to spend that much time like they did with Will Levis, working on those mechanics before they really got, sunk that offense in, right? Because if Will Levis had those mechanical things down, is it reasonable to think that last offseason the Levis to Ridley connection would have maybe developed faster because they wouldn't have had to worry about those things as much? Could have the offense looked like it could have been in sync a little bit better? Like, I think that's the big change here, right? Is that this time around, they feel confident in the way their guy plays quarterback from the get-go, versus the thought in the back of the mind that is, well, there are ways we need to change this guy to get to a level of play for a quarterback, and then we can get into what the offense is.
Yeah, and I'm curious because Coach Wills and Eddie both bring up something in the chat that I was kind of thinking through the course of the video. Is it possible that this is a sort of maturation of the coaching staff as well? That maybe it's not just a complete indictment on Will Levis, and I'm just spitballing, just entertaining other alternatives.
Sure.
But is it possible that Brian Callahan maybe thought, man, we spent so much time last summer working on the mechanics of Will Levis that we got behind on other things, and maybe it was like, you know, implementing different concepts into the offense that Levis kind of struggled with, or just getting more reps, those sorts of things, just leaning into to the to what he was as a prospect instead of trying to change him. Maybe I don't know, man. I mean, if you watch the two quarterbacks, I think it's easy to see just on tape of the difference between the two, and why you would probably feel more comfortable just letting Cam do his thing than Levis.
Yeah, and I think, like, not to go full revisionist history, right? Because, like, we came into the pre-draft process, like, having the same concerns that, like, these turnover-worthy type of plays, like, it felt more like if Cam truly is, like, making those same types of plays but has like the right head on his shoulders, there's no reason to change those mechanics.
Yes.
Will was making those mistakes because the mechanics were not as great, and also the head was not on the shoulders, right? Like
Yeah.
those are two problems you have to fix instead of maybe half a problem or so. And I think that's where we are, right? And Kenneth says, looking at Callahan from a year ago, looks like Levis has aged him in dog years. Jacob also saying there was a story about Coach Callahan asking Ward to remove a false/hitch step from his throwing motion in a private workout, and Cam fixed it immediately. Right, like all these things that we did not see behind closed doors that make at least this coaching staff feel so that much more confident in the guy. And I think that's one of the biggest differences, that you can start the offseason program not having to worry about those things like we were all worrying about last offseason, kind of going through the entirety of training camp and trying to say the main objective here was finding out what you have with Will Levis. And we get to week 1 and we still don't know what we have in Will Levis. We just won't know what we have in Cam Ward, but you can feel more confident that about the outcomes than the
Yeah.
kind of situation we were in last offseason where we went into week 1. We were like, I don't know. We'll see. Like, who knows? Like, I think that's one of the biggest differences. And
Yeah.
Cam, I think also had a very impressive, as impressive as you can have throwing against air and working with your team, but the command of the field and of the, I guess, the media presence, and certainly from what it sounds like with his rookie teammates, like it's very promising and it gives me a lot of confidence in the guy.
I distinctly remember after like I think it was leading into the third preseason game, getting a group message from Easton that you backed up that was like, "Hey guys, I think we should start talking about what's going on with Will Levis and Calvin Ridley, because this thing hasn't really clicked." And it feels a lot different from that experience last summer already. What I came on here last week and talked about how rookie minicamp is important because you want to see Cam Ward kind of take control, not necessarily like take command of the offense, but just be in control, be the leader, start establishing that bridge to your teammates and being that figure for them. And from the limited clips we saw from the articles that were posted, that sort of thing, it does kind of feel like Cam has really taken the steps to establish that presence. Is like, this is going to be his team now. And I think that is an important step in this. And it's one that I feel pretty confident now, the more we learn about Cam Ward, that he is cut out to be that type of player at the most important position on the field.
Yeah, I agree with you there. And just a little bit of an aside, it looks like we have yet another move being made here by the Titans as we are live on the air, something we were going to get to a little bit later after the rookies, but I guess now is as good as time. We'll talk about the moves here and then continue. The Titans have signed, let's see, they've signed cornerback Amani Aruwariye. I think Aruwariye is how you say
Okay.
it, from Dallas. a outside boundary cornerback to bring depth there. They also signed defensive lineman Carlos Watkins. They were assigned linebacker Amari Burney off waivers from Las Vegas. They terminated the contract of one of our favorite witness protection program players, Abdullah Anderson. And they waived Garnett Hollis Jr., who was one of the cornerbacks they signed as a UDFA. So some of those moves there, we can get into some of, the bigger moves and what it may mean. And are they really consequential here at the end of the episode? However, Cam Ward, like you said, like really, really impressive. No, Derek, they did not wave back, unfortunately. Unfortunately, they did not wave back. However, Cam Ward, a lot of questions about, and we'll avoid the Roger slander today. Don't worry. We'll save that for another day.
Safe. He's safe today.
He's safe today. He is safe today. Cam, I think, had a really great answer about, wanting to get as in on the playbook as possible, along with this confidence idea that we're talking about here. It really does feel like, could the offense be taking instead of trying to do what maybe they did with Will Levis last year and fit the player into the offense, could we see yet another step of maturity and see the offense fit the quarterback, maybe this more harmonious relationship between an offense and a quarterback? And this excerpt comes from a article from fellow friend of the podcast, Teron Davenport of ESPN, in which he said, Titans coach Brian Callahan has already started marrying some of the passing concepts Ward executed at Miami to their offense to make the quarterback comfortable early in the process. Callahan said he and the offensive staff have watched a lot of tape to get a firm grasp on what worked for Ward at Miami. We have it all broken down and put it all in our terminology, Callahan said before rookie minicamp last week. We try to teach our system the way we run it, and then we take input from Cam and all the quarterbacks, for that matter, on different things they've done, how they've called it, how they've read it. So it seems like trying to, along with the confidence that you feel good about the mechanics of this quarterback already, marrying some of those ideas and those concepts to yet again get ahead of the game here is something that I think is really important and shows the maturity and how smart the guy is, and all of these things that made him the guy that they could not pass up at number 1 in the draft. And then also just hearing Cam on where he's at with the playbook. Also, I think for my money's worth, should give Titans fans confidence about their quarterback and the attitude he brings. Here's what he had to say on the playbook and that idea of marrying the Titans offensive style to what he did at Miami.
Making it digestible for you.
It's been the same route concepts, a little bit different footwork, but that's all comes with time and preparation. I got two, good coaches who continue to motivate me every day, and Coach Callahan and Coach Bo. And so, I think I got a good group of guys around me to help me as well. When I get a chance to meet the other quarterbacks in person, they'll continue to motivate me. I'll motivate them. And so I'm just ready, to put the pass on, get some time with the other vets when they get out here Monday.
How fast do you go with the playbook? And are they trying to get you to kind of pace yourself and take it as it's installed, or are you a guy that's looking pages ahead?
It's a little bit both. I like to freelance on my own, get deep into the playbook. But every day we run this play. So, they're not really pushing everything on me at once. At the end of the day, we got to go through installs and get better at the little things. And so, but I continue to look ahead. I continue to prepare the way I know how to prepare. And it's going to be good.
Certainly seems confident in his ability, as well as just this eagerness is something that maybe we didn't feel last year as well. Like, it just, bottom line with Cam, and to get to some of your what fellow beat reporters saw, like all the things that we've been saying all along with him, like the ball comes out quick. This is a guy who can play on task. The anticipation of his game is really strong when it's on. And even his new teammate, Elik Ayomanor, said the same thing here, where, talking about Cam is never late. He's always on time. And this is what, he had to say with his glowing remarks of Cam when it comes to on the field.
It's fun to finally be where you're going to be at and get some work and get some good honest work in. How's it been like to work with Cam over the course of the past couple days?
It's been great, yeah. It's he gets the ball out really fast, which is great, and it's something that I have to get used to for sure. And so I'm excited to work with him in the future.
What's kind of the biggest adjustment you have to make to that effect on your end?
Oh, you just have to be ready. You know that he's going to be on time every time, and so you have to have that in mind every time. Like if you're late, you're late, because he's not going to be late.
Every time?
Yeah, he's going to be on time every time.
Just a great kind of quote from him, which not just on M.L.Rose's side, but like the confidence that Cam is already showing, I think is something that's super promising and exciting as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I also jotted this down during the video because I didn't want to forget it, but I do think that talking about the marriage of concepts between the Miami offense and Brian Callahan's offense, he being Brian Callahan has mentioned that they wanted to make Joe Burrow's rookie year like an extension, another year at LSU. And so when he draws on that experience that he's referred to in the past, you see this is kind of the blueprint for how they handled things with Joe Burrow, easing him into the NFL. And he's been down that road before, and now he's taking that approach with Cam Ward. Probably a smart thing to do. It's a proven method, at least in the sense of the Cincinnati Bengals doing it with Joe Burrow. I also got distracted reading Eddie's comment because guys say the balls come out quick. And one of the knocks on Ward's was that he had a tendency to throw behind guys, wondering how those concepts marry. I would say placement and timing are two different things. So the ball can get to where it's supposed to be on time, and it might not necessarily be the most well-placed ball. So I feel like that's what they're talking about, is like, you've got to be ready. Like the moment you're open, the ball's going to be there. But there are instances on Cam Ward's tape where specifically on slants and other in-breaking routes where I've got one coming up in this week's Film Friday from the Cal game where it's like the ball is on the inside shoulder. Well, not the inside shoulder if you're breaking in, but it's behind the wide receiver breaking in, and they have to kind of stop and adjust to it. So I think those are two different things. Just because the ball's not placed out in front of the wide receiver in stride, that sort of thing, doesn't mean that it's not on time. As far as the timing goes, I think the ball's still getting to where it's supposed to be when it's supposed to be there.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Zedine also says it feels like Cam will tell everyone where he wants them and have them adjust to him, where when Levis was trying to adjust specifically for each player, which I think is just another kind of moxie sort of confidence thing with your quarterback that I think is important in the relationship. All right, we can move on from the quarterback and Callahan conversation because I'm sure that's a lot of ways to go. We got a ways to go, and I'm sure we're going to be talking about it all summer. However, there were some other exciting guys, and maybe Kenneth is still here watching. I feel like we've been very positive. I decided to be a little more positive today on this episode because I do think there are positive things to talk about. And one of those is that Femi Oladejo, I feel like, has already changed the narrative. I feel like we've stopped talking about 4.5 sack Femi because of, obviously, many Titans fans probably did not get the chance to really see this guy in action like some of us did at the Senior Bowl. But you look at some of the clips that you saw from Femi this weekend, and I do subscribe to this idea that how could somebody look at a player like him and say that is an inside linebacker? That is an off-ball linebacker, because I don't see it.
It's insane, man. Like, the conversation has shifted from like, well, what did the Titans see in this guy to draft him so highly, to what the hell was wrong with UCLA's coaches where they didn't have this guy at the edge rushing the passer from the get-go. I mean, you look at this. Look at the guy's legs. Look at his thighs. That's crazy. The length, the burst, the power. It's like, man, like what were you doing, UCLA?
Yeah, I mean, but you look at the power, like everything I said over draft weekend and continue to say, like, this guy's work ethic and the speed to power in year one will work, right? Like, I think you just look at a guy like this and say, this is a guy who I think is going to have enough production to make it worthwhile of your pick. But the upside is how raw the player is, right?
He just
The
throws that sled up in the air.
how
It's
raw
awesome.
the technique is on some of these plays. And if this is a big if, because I'm still kind of out on Ben Bloom and his system and whatnot, but if
Oof.
I'm cautiously
Ben Bloom catching strays today.
he may be catching a few strays. I didn't mean to, but like I think there is still like it's in the ball's in their court to develop this guy, right? He has the intangibles. You can just look at him. The effort, also if you look at some of the clips they had of him as well, the energy, the effort, the speed, the power, the size, everything is there to where this guy, as I've been saying, the speed to power in 2025 will make him a productive player. But it's now on them to develop him. And I'm super excited to watch that develop the development the entire offseason. That's the biggest thing with Femi. Like I have no doubts that like I'm excited to see this guy go up in pads against other guys. But to see those tweaks in technique and see him develop some other moves and potentially be in those one-on-one drills and we start to see him use a club move or a swim move or something like that a lot more effectively in practices coming up this offseason, that's what makes me the most excited about a guy like this.
Yeah, and it's man, like that's the sweet spot because we already see the speed to power that works with Femi. We already see the traits, the length, the strength, the power, all that sort of stuff, the burst. We see that. And you just think if he can really continue on this trajectory of learning more moves and becoming more of a well-rounded pass rusher with a more robust skill set, that's a really high ceiling player.
Yep.
And that's a guy that probably does justify being selected where he was.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. Eddie says, call that man Tropicana because he's got the juice. Coach Wills does bring up a interesting point. If it is Femi versus Dan Moore, what do we take away from that? What do we take away potentially from that one? We'll have to see. Eddie also says he's got nitrous for blood. If they can teach him the controls, you hope he makes the impact. But I think the traits there were enough, and people are starting to see the reason why you bring a guy like that on. When you have those traits, which this team loves, mixed with that type of personality the team is looking for, it makes all the sense in the world why he was not a reach for this regime. And so I'm super excited to see him as we start to get the pads on and we go to mandatory minicamp and we see more drills out of him and get to see him work next to Arden Key and Draymond Jones and all these other guys. Excited to see that. Two other guys who we didn't get to see, but just an update on them. Kevin Winston Jr. was reported to be on track for the beginning of the season, kind of like what we said last Tuesday when we were with you, saying like if he is, I think we're still both on the same page. Like I think Kevin Winston Jr., if he can get back to playing form for training camp, I think he has as good of a shot of any to be like a rotational guy who plays meaningful snaps from day one. And I think that's good to hear on his side. Once again, his press conference, all the same, the confidence, the professionalism, all the things you want to see. And then Kalel Mullings, who was not out there, still working through his injury that he got off-season surgery. Probably expect him to be there for training camp, but wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him until then. And that leaves us with wide receivers and Gunnar Helm conversation, which I think the wide receivers is a very interesting one, and it's going to be one all offseason. But before we get to that, have to give a shout out to our lovely sponsor, M.L.Rose Craft Beer and Burgers, 7 locations across the greater Nashville area, including Capitol View, Franklin, Gallatin, Melrose 8th Avenue, Mount Juliet, Sylvan Park, and an 8th coming soon to Inglewood. Got to get out there because they simply have the best selection of beer and burgers, over 25 beers on tap. Craft burgers. I had I had the bacon jam burger with my mom when we went last time. Delicious, very good. She got the Belgian burger, also very delicious. We shared some Nashville hot cheese curds. So good. Got to get out there because I was down and we were there for right before it was a Tuesday night, and in the Nashville SC, we're playing at home. We were over by the 8th Avenue one, and it was packed. It was rocking. And so I love M.L.Rose, and you should too. Once again, 7 locations across the greater Nashville area. Find one nearest to you at mlrose.com. Tell them the Hot Read podcast sent you. And then Sinkers Beverages, 4-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year. Best selection of liquor, wine, and spirits that this city has to offer. When you go over there and shop with them, make sure you sign up for their in-crowd for special benefits, tastings, and allocations. Thank you to both of them for sponsoring the show. Okay, wide receivers, Stoney, which I think is going to be one of the more interesting conversations that we have all offseason. Because obviously, I don't think there's been a player that is more hyped ever as a Titans UDFA than Xavier Restrepo. I just don't think it's happening.
Here we go.
Xavier Restrepo, obviously, from all intents and purposes, from all these beat reporters said, in terms of 7-on-7 play, you saw that connection work out well with Cam. They said he was the most polished wide receiver out there. He was some were saying the best wide receiver out there for them. Obviously, he's been getting a lot of social media attention because it's very easy for the Titans to just say Cam to Restrepo, right? And it has created this gigantic just hype train for the guy. However, I still, once again, I cautiously optimistic is the way that you want to attack the offseason. And I know I continue to get hate about this, right? Because I think it's better to be cautiously optimistic than anything else. In especially with the Tennessee Titans, as we've seen in the last couple of years. However, like, by no means do I think, unfortunately, for Titans fans, that he proved anything that makes him a sort of lock or this guy who deserves to be on the roster this weekend, right? Because I think when you still boil down to it, I'm keeping the 3 veterans on the roster. If we were to do another preliminary wide receiver list here, right? You have Calvin Ridley, you have Tyler Lockett, Van Jefferson. Surprisingly, under the radar, I think Alec Ayumanor looked very good. I think he's going to be a guy who, especially from the get-go, if there's one of these 3 wide receivers that has the best chance to make an impact early, I think it's Ayumanor. I just, going from what he did in college to this type of system and working with Cam, I think this dude has everything that he needs to succeed. Chimere Dike also is just going to be a versatile guy, immediately playing all 3 positions. So you have those 2 guys who I think are pretty, certain to be guys that make the roster. And then if we learn anything from what the Titans have done over the last 2 years, and specifically with Brian Callahan teams, they usually like to keep 6 wide receivers. And so that leaves the conversation with guys like Treylon Burks, Bryce Oliver, Jaquan Jackson, James Prochet, Colton Dowell, and did I say Bryce Oliver? Did I say him yet?
You did, yes.
Okay, Bryce. Yeah, and is that it? That might be it. But there are a few other.
Yeah, there's some other guys.
Some other guys, but specifically guys like Treylon Burks, Jaquan Jackson, Bryce Oliver. 3 guys who were on this team last year. Jaquan Jackson, I think, is not very much a factor. However, Bryce Oliver, a guy who showed up in the last 5-6 games, may have not had the most production, but is one of the major key contributors to what turned around the team's special teams success last year.
Yes.
I think when I talk about a wide receiver room of the 3 vets, the 2 rookies, and Bryce Oliver, it is in the pole position right now at that 6th spot because of what he does on special teams, and still kind of fits into that X/Z role that NWI did, which means that I think there's going to be some competition, and this is what you want in your room. And if there's a guy who is going to outwork Bryce Oliver, Treylon Burks, well, everyone outworks Treylon Burks, it seems like, but Jaquan Jackson, Colton Dowell, James Prochet, the wide receiver they just signed from UConn, like, I do think that is the key right there. These guys who have roster spots are going to have to, once again, make sure they deserve them, because they do have this guy in Xavier Restrepo who outworks him. And Kenneth disagrees with me. I'm going to plant my flag. Van Jefferson, outside of an injury, is a lock for this team. I'm sorry. I don't think there's a world where they carry 2 veteran receivers in Calvin Ridley and Tyler Lockett, and the other 3 to 4 are guys who have played 0 to 1 year of NFL experience. I just don't see it happening. And maybe he's not a lock because he gets injured, but like if he is not a lock, it means they bring in another veteran wide receiver. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. As far as the Restrepo conversation, special teams to me, when you get to that like 6th or 7th spot, it is sort of a tiebreaker, and he's in a room. It's a crowded wide receiver room to begin with. I feel like they've got like 20 wide receivers on the roster right now. When you're looking at the guys that are competing for that spot, the Bryce Oliver, even the Colton Dowell, when healthy, he was a big special teams guy.
Yep.
The whole bit a couple of years ago was, wow, Colton Dowell's Pro Bowl special teamer. We kind of ran that into the ground a little bit.
Yeah.
But Jaquan Jackson, a returner, James Prochet, special teams guy, TJ Sheffield, the receiver out of UConn you mentioned they just signed, played special teams. Restrepo did not. So he's kind of behind the curve on that. And I do think when you get on down the depth chart, the more things you can do to help the team, the more or the less expendable you make yourself. And so Restrepo, I'm not saying that he can't do it. I'm just saying that he doesn't have that experience compared to some of the other guys that are coming for that spot right now. And I think it puts him at a disadvantage.
I absolutely agree with that as well. Here's what Brian Callahan had to say on Restrepo, and some good things about him, right? There was a reason that he is the Miami all-time leader in receptions and was also up there in receiving yards and touchdowns. Like the production, despite maybe not being the fastest, maybe not being the most, technical route runner, may not being, the guy that can separate the most. The production is still there. And in the NFL, production is king, right? So there are some players that it just works for them, right? They find ways to be productive in the NFL. But here's what Brian Callahan had to say about adding a guy like Restrepo.
Been a really productive college player. I mean, if you look at all the names of receivers that have played at the University of Miami, and he's at the top, which is impressive. He might not necessarily be the biggest or the fastest player that's probably ever come out of Miami, but he's been incredibly productive, and he's found ways to play football the right way. So he'll start out as a slot player for us, and he'll have every chance to compete just like everybody else will. But you look at his production and what he's done as a football player, and he puts himself in pretty good position to be competitive. And even though he didn't run the fastest time in the world, I'm excited to see what he can do.
And scouting 40 time wasn't that big a deal for you guys?
It all matters. Yeah, it matters. But I think you see the football player and you see the speed that he plays with when he plays. I wouldn't have thought that would have been the time that he ran. But that's how you go from a potential draft pick to being an undrafted free agent at the end of the day. And then he's got a lot to prove, and I'm excited to see him do it.
And scouting Cam, did you end up?
And so, right, it's very fun to think that the connection between Cam Ward and Xavier Restrepo is something that is exciting and worth keeping on the roster. But the reality is, like you said, Stoney, there's going to be a lot of competition on this roster, and which is good. And if he can't contribute, because I don't think there is a world in which, in my opinion, that Xavier Restrepo ends up being like wide receiver 5 or better. Like I just think, given the draft capital that they used on these wide receivers in Ayumanor and DK, and then also Lockett and Van Jefferson, like I just don't see a world where he isn't wide receiver 6. And I do have a piece coming out on Stacking the Inbox, kind of deep diving into how really does the wide receiver connection really matter from college, and what the top end has been, what has not really worked out, and then potentially the most likely scenario with a Cam and Restrepo connection in the NFL, which I think I'm going to drop that tomorrow or Thursday. But the bottom line is, like, he's going to have to compete, and I think it is still very much an uphill battle, but I think it's exciting for Titans fans to see, because like you said, there is a lot of competition in this room right now. And it's good because I think you do have maybe not the most flashy of young wide receivers, but guys who are willing to work their butts off and guys who I think are really in prime position to be role players on this team from day one. And I think that's something that's exciting for the Titans because they didn't necessarily have that behind Calvin Ridley or DeAndre Hopkins last year or even in years past.
No, absolutely. I was just about to say the same thing. It's like the team was not this stacked at wide receiver. And I don't mean stacked like, oh, wow, they've got 6 all-pros out there. But I think this room has a lot more upside than it did last summer, and there's a lot more competition in it. And that's what you want to create because competition makes everybody better. Iron sharpens iron, all that stuff. So I think the receiving room, while they don't have a lot of proven names, are really any proven names outside of Calvin Ridley and Tyler Lockett. Maybe you count Van Jefferson's one of his early seasons is proven. I don't know, but they don't have a lot in the way of experience there, but I think they've got a lot of upside in ways that they haven't in years past.
Yeah, I agree. And Daniel, like I said this tongue in cheek because it is real. And like the like unfortunate for Titans fans, just like we talked about with the way the media has covered this team. It will be interesting to see if Restrepo continues to perform and continues to elevate into a position where he is running with maybe the second team or first team. Because as of right now, the reality is, and this is just a fact because this is how it works, Restrepo will be running with Brandon Allen and Will Levis and Tim Boyle. Like that's how it works. That you give Cam the guys that you know are going to be starting and playing the most snaps every day, like every week. Like that's just how it works. And so if he can make his way back to that first team reps, that is all you need to know about a guy. Which I mean, and that's right. People in the comments, this is the out of control hype train that I cannot get. Spade of Ace, he will be the best wide receiver on the roster, zero question. And that's why he was a UDFA, guys. He will be the best guy on the roster. UDFA. Better than Calvin Ridley. Better than Tyler Lockett. A 10-year veteran. Like better than the 2 guys that they drafted before him and had every opportunity in the draft to draft him. Like Coach Will says, do you think Cam will have a say with the wide receivers or Restrepo's side? Who will be Cam's guys? I don't think so. Like you got the guy on your team. It's now up to Restrepo to compete and beat out these guys. It no longer is Cam's team. It's not Cam's team, right? I mean, we heard that it was, he was lobbying for him because of them being very good friends, right? And they're both competitors and they both deserve to be in this league. But the fact, like, I don't think there's any real, there's no world I see where Cam is demanding that Restrepo is on this team or else he's not going to play. Like, I don't know. Like, yeah, he's holding out. Like he's on the team now and Cam did his job getting him here. It's now on him to beat out some of these guys. And it's going to be an uphill battle because the Bryce Olivers of the world, the Jaquan Jacksons, whose backs are against the wall, the Colton Dowells, who are looking to make a return, the James Proches, who are getting their chance here. These are guys who are going to be just as hungry to make this team. So that's where I am.
Well said. I'm right there with you, JT.
Yeah. And so I think the last guy we have to talk about here is Gunnar Helm, which I think one of the guys that I think I'm the most high on now, which I've changed my mind on, is Gunnar Helm. I think there's a world where Gunnar Helm is already past Josh Wiley already.
Yeah, I do too.
Like it with nothing else. And we have one clip here as we end out the show today with Gunnar Helm talking about what kind of position he plays. And the answer to me just like blown away, the confidence and the professionalism and things like that he had to say. Here's what he had to say on what type of tight end he is in the or what he wants to be in the NFL. Here's what he had to say.
I feel like you're more of an inline tight end or more of a split tight end. What do you feel like is your strength?
To be honest, it's not really up to me. It's all Coach Callahan's vision for me. However I can help the team, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I played both in college. I think it's a pretty big misconception that, might not have had a great blocking year last year, but for 3 years, including my true freshman year, I was blocking a prime Arkansas defense on the road in Fayetteville when I was 18 years old as the starting Y, and then those next 2 seasons behind a really good tight end, Jatavian Sanders, up there with Carolina. Just developed. Went into each week preparing like I was a starter, grasped the offense, and then obviously met with my coach and, went off and running from there, just how to get better, what I needed to do. But I think I portrayed everything in college. I think in line, in the slot, even out wide. I've done some stuff in the backfield. I mean, it's really however Coach Callahan wants to use me.
Man,
a lot of confidence. Like this guy, when
that.
you talk about going from him to Josh Wiley in this room, there's a reality, in my opinion, that we haven't seen the Callahan offense work to its fullest potential because Josh Wiley just wasn't able to execute that type of job. And if you put Gunnar Helm in that, where Josh Wiley was last year, you might see a lot more offensive production, because I think this is a guy who not only right now is on the same level as a Josh Wiley on the depth chart, but has the chance to become the tight end 1 of this team by the beginning of the season. And I love Chig Okonkwo. We all know this. Like Chig Okonkwo, ride or die. But like Gunnar Helm, you just talk about him going and pinpointing exact positions of where he really had to work on and display what he does best and what he needed to do. Like, shows you how dialed in his mentality is, his competitiveness is, the professionalism there. Like, this is a guy who I'm all on board with going forward.
I'm really glad that he kind of pushed back on this narrative that he can't block, because that's the thing everybody says, like, oh, he's a yak guy. He's, open field, nimble runner, but not much in the way of a blocker. And I feel like I've been alone on this island just screaming, Gunnar Helm's not that bad of a blocker. Like, he blocks with pretty good form. I don't know that he's the most powerful guy. Like, I don't think you see a whole lot of drive in his run blocking, that sort of thing. But I think he's a pretty decent, like, hit whatever's moving around you kind of blocker. I called him a mosh pit style blocker. Like, he's going to get in the pit and throw elbows with somebody. He might not be the most powerful, but to say that he just can't block at all, I think is a disservice to him and the body of work that he put out there in college. And I think it's the thing that people are discounting and frankly sleeping on when it comes to Gunnar Helm, that could make him the most reliable tight end on this roster by season's end. I won't be surprised if he ends up as tight end 1 on this team at some point in 2025, just because I think he's a little more versatile than people give him credit for. Like him as a pass catcher. I like him. He is a nimble runner. He can walk the tightrope up the sideline. He's got a tremendous wingspan, all that stuff. I get it, but I think he's a better blocker than people give him credit for. And I'm glad that he brought the receipts to the press conference, and I'm glad he stood up for himself in that regard.
I do like that. And so those are the guys who, I was able to catch a lot of it in the impressions I took away. I cannot wait to be out there and see these guys in person in just a couple of weeks, because that's where we start. And it also lines up well because we're going to start getting them mixed in to, once again, these are rookies on rookies and rookies on air, right? Like, there's nothing. The big test will be, okay, can you play against actual NFL talent? And can you then play against NFL talent with pads on? Like, I feel like with some of these guys, we were in the same, like, some of us were lulled into this Gabe Judy Lowry type of place last year with him. And we saw how that ended up, how he, turned back into a pumpkin once the pads went on. Like, there's always the chance that, once again, like, these things change once we put the pads on, which is why, not saying like it's very good to be excited, but cautiously optimistic about some of these guys, especially the Restrepos of the world and the Gunnar Helms and some of those guys. Last couple of things here. We'll get to some of these questions and get out of here. QC Hawk says, didn't talk about him, but this is something I do want to bring up. Like, when we get to actual mandatory minicamp and OTAs, I'm excited to see Jackson Slater dance with Bertha. And
you and me both.
I wanted to bring this up even before QC Hawk brought it up today. I was on my drive home today, and I said, man, I cannot wait to see Jackson Slater go up against Bertha, because that's going to be a lot of fun.
Just get them big old ham hocks in there and blow that bitch off her feet. That's what I'm looking for.
I love it. QC Hawk says Restrepo's ability to catch a sunflower thrown by Femi has me sold. JT, time for you to go on him. Sorry, guys. Yep, I agree with Ace of Spades. He is the best wide receiver on the roster here. Bruce says, I'm too busy with David Gabenda tape to worry about the social media team. David Gabenda, another guy that with the corners, we didn't talk about Marcus Harris and all these guys, and we did talk about the new signings that they had. A lot of those are pretty much nothing, just churning the roster, using the waiver claim system to their advantage, I think, in most aspects. However, like the linebackers like Benda and these cornerbacks, I think none of it is really worthwhile until we get to pad season, right? Like, I just don't think there's a lot you can take away. But David Gabenda, a guy that I think is on my radar and a lot of guys' radars here this offseason. So excited to see him. Zedine saying Femi is built like Groot. And you see JP Latham, he looks like he dropped 20 to 30 pounds. He looks good. Like he looks toned, he looks ripped, he looks like he's like ready to go. And so I'm excited to see that. And also on Friday, can't wait to break down, great episode, the schedule release episode.
About it. Can't wait.
Because they do drop the schedule tomorrow night. No international games, which I put out a tweet last week saying gut feeling the Titans are playing the Browns in London, that trash game that they always just throw overseas to the UK. But it did not happen. The Titans do not have a international game, which good for me. I love traveling, but I did not want to travel this year. So exciting that they're not going to do that. Are we going to see another Broadway video? Well, I don't know. Maybe that's why they have not put out any quality cam clips. They've been working too hard on their schedule release video.
Yeah, maybe
that's what it is. Maybe the cam things will be coming later. Stoney, anything else from rookie minicamp that you wanted to point out?
No, more thing today. Oh wait, you know what? I did jot this down at one point during this episode. Can Riley Leonard win the Colts job?
It's a good question.
Just think about it, everybody.
I don't know, but I'll do one more bold take. You want to make one more bold take before we get out of here on the schedule release? Here's my bold take. The Titans begin their season at New Orleans, and Will Levis is the starting quarterback for the Saints.
Oh boy, that is quite bold. I'm gonna say, I don't know. I don't have a bold take. I can't think of anything right now. I can't even remember who their opponents are right now.
That's fine. It's okay. The last thing, Kenneth says JT won't listen to me on bets, loses, won't listen to me on Vrabel, fired, won't listen to me on Cam. I'll just be right again on Jefferson. We'll see, my friend. We will see. But that's going to do it for today's episode of the Hot Read Podcast. Thank you all for being here once again. Appreciate you guys being here with us in the comment section. As always, another great episode. Recapping rookie minicamp. Excited that football is a little bit back and we get to dive into a lot of these rookies before we get to that month and a half of darkness where it's just doom and gloom before we're back right into the content machine of the NFL.
So when I start working on next year's draft.
Yeah.
I'm already working on it, but that's
who are you watching right now?
I just wrapped up Sam Levitt, and I'm trying to get through. I'm trying to get through the quarterback. So I kind of want to watch this kid from Arkansas because he's starting to get a little bit of buzz, and the kid from Indiana too that everybody says is going to end up as QB1. This whole thing, I'm a little skeptical, but just trying to work through like the top 10 or so quarterbacks, get to a good space before the season starts.
Yeah, it's going to be super exciting. And Bustin' Diamond says, who is the best wide receiver in the class?
I'm not prepared to talk wide receivers. I don't have my list in front of me, so I can't. Not the kid from South Carolina that Zach was texting me about over the weekend. Apparently, Zach's watching the wide receiver class next year already, and he's like, this kid from South Carolina is a fraud.
All right. Well, that is good to hear. Drew says TJ Parker to Nashville in 2026.
There we go. Right. Let's start the campaign.
Well, thank you to M.L.Rose and Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the show as well. Check out an M.L.Rose near you, 7 locations in the Nashville area by going to mlrose.com. And until Friday, when we're breaking down the schedule and talking more about apparently the best wide receiver on the Titans, Xavier Restrepo.
In NFL history.
In NFL history. This has been the Hot Read Podcast. We will talk to you then. Have a good week, everybody.